All right, free fucking will.
This episode's about free will.
Yeah.
All right, I choose to access my free will by saying I'm not doing this episode. See you guys.
All right, bye.
Shit.
I mean, that makes sense,
That's the ultimate expression of free will.
I know. He's just like, yeah, no. I'm going to prove free will exists right now.
I'm glad we both didn't pull dense philosophical musings, Yeah,
that's the important thing. Yeah. Bum, 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 bum. I hate this topic. I don't know. I've hated it from day one.
I hate arguing with people about it. I understand it, but I think nobody else does.
I hate fucking talking about it. It's my least favorite fucking topic. People are always asking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it comes up in so many religious arguments too.
I know.
So it's like you've just been inundated with it for the last 20 years.
Free will. What do you think
about free will?
What do you think about free will?
Why people do bad shit? Because of free will.
I never really talked about it, so I guess I'm going to talk about it. But we got to talk about other shit first. So,
do we?
Oh yeah, I gotta get into what I actually think about free will. We have to talk about a bunch of other shit.
What if I don't care about what you think about free will?
I mean, that's fine. You don't have to. I don't really mind if you don't. That's fine.
Just fuck with you.
I don't care what I think about it. It's my least favorite topic for a reason. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Right?
Well, why is it you're just because of all those times you've argued it? That's why your least favorite, or why is it your least favorite of I guess philosophical concepts?
Because it doesn't. Like when we do, I don't know what order these episodes are going to come out in, but assuming that they come out in the order we shot them, which they don't always do that. But we just got done doing a Paul episode. Paul introduced some concepts like eternal recurrence. Eternal recurrence may or may not be true, but when I reference that sort of concept in my mind, it has an impact on my perceptions of things. But whether or not free will exists, I just don't give a shit. It's like, what does it matter? Like my decision-making process remains the same either way, right? It doesn't actually impact me at all.
Maybe it doesn't.
I don't really understand that. I mean, the philosophical ramifications of it or whatever, to me are basically nil. So I don't know. But whatever, I'll tell you what I think about it anyway.
Okay.
But before we do that, we have to kind of get into probability.
Okay.
Human beings are pattern-seeing creatures, right? So we're always trying to figure things out. Reality as it's laid before us and all that. And probability is basically the science of maybes and trying to assess,
could happen
in any given situation. What is the coin going to do? What is the dice going to do? Or the die, singular being die. What are the dice going to do? Assuming you're looking at 2 or 3 or more. But the problem, of course, is that reality, often refuses to conform neatly to our mathematical constructs. Take the tossing of the coin, for example. Flip the coin. Oh, it's 50-50. It's not actually 50-50. There's actually a bunch of other factors that could fucking determine it. Sometimes the coin lands on its edge, for instance. Very rare.
Do you know what's cool that I
can't
did?
Happen.
There's a place around here that if there's a football game going on and you get a burger, you can flip the place little. You can flip it. The manager comes and flips it. And if you guess right, you win a burger.
Cool.
And of all the people there, 5 people got burgers, but only 2 got theirs for free. Only 2 people. Think about that. If it's 50-50 and we all guess differently, you figure oh man, it must be maybe 3. Maybe 3 people would get it. Nope. Only fucking 2. Because its probability with that is every time you flip the coin, you have that.
Well, not only that, but it actually matters which side the coin starts on.
Exactly. It's true.
Depending on the kind of coin, it could be weighted differently, depending on what the coin has been through.
The environmental conditions?
Yeah, the environmental conditions can influence it. There's all kinds of things that influence it.
If the person knows how to flip it a certain way,
it's not a perfect 50-50.
It's not. Of course it's not. That's not actually true. But
it's just
we look at it that way.
Yeah, well, it's the easiest way to do it. Despite sophisticated models and decades of refinement, meteorologists cannot predict the exact path of a hurricane weeks in advance. Why? Because chaos, the butterfly effect, tiny changes in initial conditions produced vastly different outcomes. And that lurks everywhere in our world, especially when we're talking about more sophisticated models with lots and lots
We're
of
pretty good at
right?
3 days. So for meteorology, my understanding is we're pretty good at forecasting the next 3 days. But of course, like you said, the further and further you get away, it's like, who knows? What the fuck's going to happen then?
Right. And let's talk about uncertainty, okay? Uncertainty is the shadow that looms over all human knowledge and decision-making. It's the acknowledgement, sometimes grudgingly. There are limits to what we know, limits to what we can predict, definitely limits to what we can fucking control. At its core, uncertainty is not just about randomness or ignorance. It's a profound feature of existence itself, woven into the fabric of both the physical universe and, of course, the human experience.
Look, dude, I mean, I think I try to pull a fast one over in the audience here because I've seen the show Breaking Bad, and Heisenberg ain't this dude.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's not Heisenberg.
Well, I couldn't get the real Heisenberg. He's unfortunately, copyrighted and stuff.
Oh shit. Okay, I guess you got this other dude, whoever the fuck he is.
You're goddamn right.
Just want to point that out some misinformation on the show.
Yeah, that's a fake Heisenberg.
I'm sorry about it.
I mean, what the fuck, dude? Who's this fucking dork? Some German or something?
Werner Heisenberg. Just the winner of the 1932 Nobel Prize in Physics.
They give those away, dude. They fucking the 30s, they gave that away.
That was like they put that in the Cracker Jack box.
Yeah,
back then,
you walk up and say like,
what goes up must come down. They give you a fucking Nobel
Prize. But this guy's like E equals MC squared, and it's like, here's a prize. Fucking 3-year-old could do that.
So there's a few different types of uncertainty. There is epistemic uncertainty, which is what stems from gaps in knowledge. It's uncertainty about the unknown. There's things we could understand better if we had more data or more tools. Like, for example, a doctor might be uncertain about the cause of a patient's symptoms because of incomplete test results or something like that.
I mean, a bad doctor.
Right. Then there's aleatory uncertainty. Unlike epistemic uncertainty, aleatory uncertainty is intrinsic randomness. It's the kind of unpredictability that arises from inherent variability within systems, like the trajectory of a dice roll or the timing of radioactive decay. No amount of knowledge can eliminate the randomness. It's just built into the nature of things. Then there's ontological uncertainty. This form addresses the unknown unknowns, the unpredictable emergence of factors or phenomena that we didn't even fucking consider. Like we could think of like the 2008 financial crisis or the discovery of quantum physics, both of which upended previous paradigms. So it's basically the black swan events. Right. No one believed in the black swan and until they fucking saw it. It's the things that we don't account for, maybe can't account for.
Unpredictable things.
Right. The unknown. There's like known unknowns and unknown unknowns. This is the unknown unknown. And then there's just the things that are just fucking random.
Because my free will
nature.
My free will again to go get my drink.
Go get your drink, Scotty.
Jesus, Scotty. Thirsty bastard, you.
I know he's a thirsty bitch. So Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics is the most famous example of uncertainty, or at least the most famous scientific one, which is basically the more precisely you measure a particle's position, the less precisely you can know its momentum. But this isn't limited to subatomic particles. Our ability to perceive the world is shaped by tools, biases, and inherent imperfections of measurement.
Sure.
So complexity of systems. Many phenomena in the natural and social worlds are so complex that even a small change in one variable can lead to disproportionately large effects. This is the butterfly effect shit, basically.
Sure.
The idea of, we've all heard the example, butterfly flaps its wings in fucking one part of the world, giant typhoon in the other part of the world. Right. And it's basically just saying that, like, if you can make a very tiny little change in the initial conditions of something and astronomical fucking results later on down the line.
Sure.
So uncertainty grows the further we look into the future. In simple systems like the trajectory of a thrown ball, we can predict outcomes with a pretty high degree of precision. But in complex systems, the slightest little variation compounds drastically over time, making long-term predictions very unreliable. Even in cases where the rules are known, such as planetary motion or stuff like that.
So what I'm getting from
disrupted hugely over large time scales.
Don't listen to no scientist because they don't know shit, know how.
It's like it's like the great Shaggy 2 Dope said, I don't want to talk to a scientist. Motherfuckers lying and getting me pissed.
I mean, clearly they are. If they're saying they know how things work and shit, but they know that this principle also exists, they be lying.
Yeah.
Oh, they be lying like crazy, dude.
Lying like fucking rugs, dude.
I always like a realization about something that lets me continue to be ignorant and ill-informed on a topic, right?
Amen.
Oh, it's always
I love that shit.
I Always the best.
How can we ever truly know?
And speaking of that kind of psychological edge, I mean, obviously, uncertainty leads to a lot of anxiety in human beings. Right? So uncertainty is uncomfortable, and existentially, it's threatening. Like, you know, if you decide to go ship off to a war or something, you don't know you're coming back, right?
Oh, you're scared shitless. Yeah.
I mean, but you could feel that way even just going out and getting in your car and driving across the country or something. You don't know. You could get in a horrible, devastating car crash.
I mean, who hasn't just been in some mundane situation where they're just like, you know what? My car might flip off this embankment like 10 times and I might end up in a stream. And I'm like, I'm fighting for my life. You don't know. Oh, my
God. Like a certain individual.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen.
You could go careening off an embankment, flip 17
Look, I know
times.
a moment that all three of us here experienced together. That was a moment of like crazy uncertainty and chaos. Which
right. That fucking house fire, right?
Well, that's one of them. But another one is when we got in that car with you, TJ, and you had to drive us back.
Oh, yeah.
After that Gurky shit.
That's true.
Well, that could have been predicted if you guys had realized the psychological impact.
I remember it very well.
Me, you know?
We're in the car, and you turn the wheel all the way to the left, and me and Paul look at each other and we're just like, what? And then but in our minds we're like, no, this course shall be corrected, because invariably TJ will know his car will slam into this fucking concrete pillar and be destroyed. No, but that didn't happen.
It did not. In fact, happened.
We went up over the concrete thing, and TJ destroyed the fucking side of the vehicle.
Oh, well.
He did, yeah.
But an amazing moment of uncertainty.
Did TJ destroy the vehicle, or did we destroy the vehicle with our trolling?
Man, your trolling led to the mental state.
It did, dude. The trolling definitely played a huge role.
So, if you look at the word chaos, it traces its roots back to ancient Greece, where it was basically sort of just like this void realm, right?
Sure.
Hesiod's theogony, chaos referred to a primordial void, the gaping chasm from which the cosmos emerged. Sorry. It was not necessarily disorder in the modern sense. It was the absence of any sort of structure, a boundless, unformed potential awaiting the forces of creation to impose order. This is basically their god, their creation myth. It just, everything just spewed forth from chaos. All of the gods, all of the planets, everything just came from the fucking, the disorganized, disordered void of fucking chaos.
Got it.
So cool. The term chaos is used colloquially today, is usually used to describe extreme disorder, extreme confusion, a chaotic classroom, traffic jam, political crisis, whatever. You know, we use, like, there's a riot going on. You know, we call it chaos.
It's complete chaos out there.
In a sense, chaos is seen as undesirable, a breakdown of order, a breakdown of coherence, a breakdown of control, or I would argue the illusion of control. In a world we reach for when events, it's a word we reach for when events feel overwhelming and situations are just fucking completely out of fucking hand. But there's a different scientific idea about chaos, which I think, you know, Jurassic Park, right? The water drop. Let me explain this to you.
Ian Malcolm, dude.
The water drop.
The greatest.
No, I can understand you. You're not doing the Ian Malcolm voice.
So give me your hand. Oh no. Right. Obviously, we want to be in a stable condition here, but we were in a van is moving. It's supposed to be stable, but you know, whatever. Yes. And we're gonna just the water drop goes here, and look, it goes down that way.
Wow.
And then but you know, we do it this again, and you think it's gonna go the same way, but no, it goes that way because chaos. You know,
chaos. Wow, it all makes sense to me now.
Yeah. In the scientific realm, chaos has a different definition, right? So developed in the latter half of the 20th century, explores systems that are sensitive, highly sensitive to initial conditions, which is the butterfly effect once again. And this is actually discovered by a meteorologist who decided he was just going to make a little change in the he's like, I'll just round some numbers in this thing because it's not going to make a difference. You know, just 0.99 versus 1. I mean, it's not going to make any fucking
nothing.
But he discovered very quickly how wrong he was because the models went fucking insanely haywire when he changed just a little tiny fucking, like, you cannot round numbers when you're doing that. And so that was chaos. So in weather forecasting, probabilistic models quantify the likelihood of various outcomes in chaotic atmosphere systems, such as hurricanes. While the exact trajectory of storms remains uncertain, probability offers a range of plausible scenarios. So that's why they never seem to quite know with this stuff, you know? They say, oh, it's going to make landfall here as a category 3, and then it ends up making landfall, 300 miles away as a category 2.
They do is they lay all the different models on top of each other when they have those hurricanes. You're kind of like looking, you're like, well, how can they all get these different measurements, right? It's like, they're all looking at the same data. You're assuming, right? Maybe there's some slight variation, but there'll be some outliers like, the European model shows it hitting Florida, but this one shows it hitting southern Texas. And you're like, what
dude,
the
that
fuck?
shit ain't cool. That shit was crazy making when I was living in that fucking state. Most of the models show that this is just going to skip off the Gulf, but the European model shows a devastating category 12. It's like,
well, I guess that's the difference
your
between
models and shit.
Is being raised in it versus having to be subjected to it.
I would imagine that is the case. Yes.
Because I always thought that was kind of an interesting part of it, at least from a scientific perspective. Obviously, I didn't want a hurricane to hit where I lived.
Well, yeah, and this is just how chaos affects probability, right? So in stable systems, i.e. pretty much fucking nothing, probabilities are pretty straightforward. Like a 6-sided die offers, generally speaking, a 1 in 6 chance for every outcome, right?
Sure.
But in a chaotic system, probabilities are not fixed. They evolve with the system. So the relationship between chaos and probability reflects a broader tension and understanding of the universe. Chaos reminds us that even deterministic systems can behave unpredictably. While probability provides a toolkit for understanding it a little better, ultimately, we're still at the mercy of these larger, grander forces.
I'll give you a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Living in Louisiana was like one of the worst storms I ever went through. It was not a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
There was no prediction of this shit. And I'm telling you, besides Hurricane Ida hitting my house, that was the worst storm I went through. And there was no fucking warning. It was just out of nowhere. It was not like, I didn't get like weather emergency, nothing like that. Just fucking hit. Trees were flying down. Power lines were going down. Fucking rain is crazy. I'm like, and luckily Taylor wasn't there because I'm like, I was in the house by myself with you, Gerald. I'm like, holy shit, dude. It's just like, am I gonna fucking die? Some crazy shit could happen. And then my mom later sent me that a tornado went right over my fucking house, basically.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And dude, and I just thought of like that kind of brought me back to this. I'm like, dude, I had no idea that was gonna happen. I had fucking not a clue. Because we talk about the hurricane, at least you kind of know it could hit, it could come. But shit like this just happens. These random hurricanes, these random tornadoes will touch down, random storms. You just don't fucking know.
I mean, what you're probably experiencing in that instance is just something that was highly improbable,
right?
But yet it came to pass. Because remember, 1 in a million shot of something happening is not no shot of something happening. So it's probably just an instance where you have a bunch of weather models that are looking at the conditions, and they're not even gonna warn you about a tornado because it's like, oh, there's like a 1 in a million shot of there being a tornado.
There was like a 5% chance of rain or some shit.
Right.
It was like or like 5% of precipitation in the area. There was no like massive storm systems.
But it just happened that you fucking landed on the fucking unlucky 1 in a million shot of there being a fucking massive tornado right then and there.
A massive storm out of nowhere, basically.
Yeah. Seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, obviously the conditions were there for it, but
it wasn't predicted.
But none of the models predicted it because it was just such an unlikely way for things to unfold.
In an area like that, people prepare for that stuff.
Right.
Like people always watching the weather and shit.
You have to. So,
dude, I had a situation like that happen to me one time. Honestly.
Okay, go ahead.
I ordered curly fries at the Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
And I got straight fries, and it ended up being good. You know what I mean? And I was like, who could have fucking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once again, the hairs on the back of Ellie Sattler's palm, you know what I mean? The little slight
did you feel like your neck hairs prick up a little bit too?
Yeah. You know what I mean?
I feel like going to fast food places is embracing chaos, dude. Because you're right. You can order something, you have no idea what you're gonna get. You might get the fucking complete opposite.
Sometimes you just have to go in there and be like, whatever they give me, I'll just eat. You know.
I mean, to a certain extent, you have to accept that no matter what. Yeah, at the fast food level for sure, though.
Well, the interesting thing is that there's also a flip side to this, because whereas it seems as though things that are supposedly ordered can suddenly become chaos, chaos can also suddenly and inexplicably become order. This is the Mandelbrot sequence we're looking at here.
Well, it wouldn't be chaos if it couldn't suddenly become order. That in itself is chaotic.
Well, I mean, it's just like the Greeks said, all the order came out of chaos.
Right.
True.
I mean, they've touched upon a truth, whether they meant to or not. I'm assuming they did. But so chaotic systems can often produce fractals, which are geometric patterns that are self-similar across scales. For example, the branching of a river network or the jagged outline of a coast may appear chaotic, but follow deterministic rules when viewed mathematically. This suggests that chaos is not the absence of order, but merely a different kind of order, one that defies linear predictability, but obeys some sort of deeper recursive structure.
Oh.
So the edge of chaos. Some scientists, theorists propose that the most complex and adaptive systems exist on the edge of chaos, a delicate balance between stability and turbulence. In this state, systems are ordered enough to sustain coherence, but chaotic enough to allow for innovation and adaptation. This concept has been applied to everything from ecosystems to neural networks to economies and social systems, highlighting the porousness of the order-chaos divide.
Oh, God, man.
What? Share your thoughts, Paul.
Because it's all like what you're saying is that like there is no order in chaos. It's all chaos, basically.
Well,
all order.
Yeah, and what I think I would say is the delineation between the two things is largely just a product of our fevered human imaginations.
Nice.
Because I mean, what we've seen is that order gives way to chaos, chaos gives way to order. It seems that these two forces, if they even are two separate forces, work in tandem with one another. And that, I mean, this thing you're looking at right here. I mean, you could, obviously we can't do it with this because this is just a JPEG, but you could zoom in endlessly and see the same pattern just recur and recur and recur and recur and recur endlessly.
Right.
All based on a very simple mathematical, formulation. So let's get to, let's start delving into the free will stuff a little bit here. So what do chaos and order have to say about free will? What the fuck do they have to do with it? So the interplay of chaos and order raises profound questions about human agency and free will. If chaotic systems operate deterministically yet unpredictably, what does this mean for our choices? Are we navigating a sea of possibilities, or are our actions merely the inevitable unfolding of a complex system? So chaos challenges the notion of absolute control. I don't know who even has the notion of absolute control at this point. I think you'd have to be a fucking moron personally, but whatever.
Yeah.
A chaotic system, even one governed by deterministic equations, is so sensitive to initial conditions that predicting long-term outcomes becomes impossible, at least impossible for us. Maybe the AI will be able to do it. Maybe they will solve all this.
Probably to a greater degree, but I don't think it ever will be fully explored.
The variables are just too multitudinous,
that's
right?
what I'm saying.
The mirrors of this mirrors the human experience while we feel in control of our actions. Countless hidden variables, genetics, environment, subconscious processes, shape our decisions in ways that we often fail to recognize. Probabilistic models offer a way to think about free will within chaos. Rather than imagining that our choices are entirely predetermined, we might view them as the most probable outcome of a chaotic decision-making process. That would align with the findings of neuroscience, where brain activity suggests decisions are influenced by prior probabilities before we are even consciously aware of them. So basically, some deeper process that's within your subconscious weighs out probabilities, and then your conscious brain is informed of the decision that has been made, and then you feel, oh, I have made the decision.
Right.
Well, did you?
No, you didn't.
You didn't really have a part in it. I mean, at least not the you that you think of.
Well, in
as
your
you.
Perception, you've made a decision. It seems to you like you've come to
perceptually, you've made a decision.
like, yes, we'll do this. We'll go here.
On a deeper level, some other process that is within your brain, if you consider it your brain, made the decision.
Well, I mean, there's other things too. I mean, outside of your purview, right? In your body, in your genes, there are some things that define how you're going to be faced with certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that entangles with societal norms being different from time to time, from place to place, and you start to realize what because you think of yourself as a relatively free thinking person, sure, but really what you are is an amalgam of a bunch of fucking happenstance that really you had no purview over at all.
I mean,
right? So
So
the
many-
choices
so
that
much
you
of what
have
you-
before you, the
Yeah.
choices that you have before you
Mhm.
are a byproduct of from your perspective, random process that you had no purview over.
right.
You had no purview over your grandparents fucking. You
No.
had no purview over your parents deciding to fuck raw at the time that they did to create you, and the
No.
era in which they brought you. You have so much of it is beyond your control, right?
Sure. I mean, like, look, take every decision a decision you've ever made, right? And imagine that you are schizophrenic or you're bipolar, or imagine that you're 50 IQ points smarter or 50 IQ points dumber. I mean, like,
Right.
these are things you have fucking
Well,
no control over whatsoever that are going to drastically affect how those processes happen.
None
right?
of those variables. I don't think anyone would want to make every single decision. Think about the decisions you've made in your life. How many decisions do you think you've made in your entire life?
Who knows?
I have no fucking idea. I mean, I know it's probably been a lot. I doubt I'd want to make it in a process like a process where I'm thinking about this now, like doing this show now, where I would want to make every single decision. Am I gonna take a shit now? Am I gonna send the signal to my bowels like time to evacuate? I don't think so.
Like, as I'm
I don't think
sitting
I'd
here,
want to.
as I'm sitting here stroking my beard, is that because I consciously am like, I will now stroke my beard? No, it's just something I'm doing. Your hand gesticulations. That's not something you're consciously like, I will now gesticulate
I'm going
with
to do
my
this.
hand. I'm going to do this.
And almost if I did, let's say if I did, like now I'm forcing myself to do it. You'd almost
Right.
recognize I'm doing that intentionally.
I'm now going to do this thing intentionally just to demonstrate it, right?
Yeah, I'm in control. See, guys?
Look.
There's no strings on me.
Ain't no strings on me. So let's talk about probabilities and preferences. So probabilistic models offer a way for us to think about free will within chaos. Rather than imagining our choices are predetermined, we might view them as probable outcomes of a chaotic decision-making process. I actually went over this already. It aligns with neuroscience and the whole thing we just discussed.
Yeah.
Quantum physics adds another layer of complexity to the discussion of chaos and free will, introducing randomness at the most fundamental level of reality. Unlike classical systems where chaos arises from deterministic equations, quantum systems involve inherent uncertainty, a feature captured by the principles of superposition and entanglement. So superposition in quantum mechanics, particles exist in a superposition of states until they are measured, right? So for example, an electron's position is not fixed, but spread out as a probability cloud. The act of measurement collapses this cloud into a single state.
This shit is so fucking beyond me, dude.
I know.
It's
This
so
suggests
beyond
that at its core, reality is probabilistic, not deterministic, raising questions about the nature of causality and choice. It's beyond it. I mean, it's beyond everybody. Let's be real.
Well, just like in quantum mechanics, like
Even the people who have done the math to figure this shit out
you're talking about how observation affects reality.
don't really understand what the
Like,
fuck that means.
And I'm sure that's why you brought up Heisenberg. It's like you look at the fucking particle and it's like, oh wait, the particle's there, but it's only there because we're observing it and looking for the particle to be there.
Right.
And it's like that. So it's like, wait, what? Like, how does that work?
Well, this is the superposition thing to me. Kind of is the thing that gets me thinking about that flat circle thing from the eternal recurrence Nietzsche thing we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, why would this particle be in multiple places, and why would observance of it collapse it? Does it actually collapse it physically, or does it just collapse it in our perception?
We're also in multiple places. That's how eternal recurrence is correct, right? We are. Every moment of time echoes in eternity because time as we experience it linearly doesn't exist outside of our experience of it. So everything that we do is eternally re-happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so your perception of where you are at your in your life right now is entirely dependent on where in that cycle you would be. So
I don't want to spoil anything, but I do come to a fairly similar conclusion with this stuff.
Well, fair enough.
No, I mean, I'm not. Go ahead. I mean, I'm not. You.
Sure.
Quantum entanglement is the other concept being quantum entanglement here, because we already went over superposition. But let's go over entanglement really quickly. Demonstrates that particles can be connected in ways that defy classical notions of causality. So a change in one particle instantaneously affects its estranged partner, regardless of distance. And this is in violation of the sort of speed of light stuff and all that. Like it could be on opposite ends of the fucking universe and it would still affect it instantaneously. The intersection of chaos theory and quantum mechanics offers intriguing perspectives on free will and determinism. While chaotic systems show that predictability is often unattainable, even in deterministic framework, quantum mechanics introduces a level of randomness that seems to make the universe itself uncertain. So we have two concepts that seem to be scientifically true. One in which a particle is everywhere in all these different positions until we observe it, and then it's in one position. And we have another thing where you can influence a particle here, and instantaneously you get a reaction from a particle that's on the other side of fucking, the vast cosmos, everything. So it's
which implies the possibility of faster than light travel and faster than light communication and all of that.
Or maybe that particle is in some other superposition right next to it, or maybe it is the same particle or something, or maybe it's all fucking one particle. Maybe there's only one particle that's just bouncing around doing all this. I don't know.
All one, TJ.
I mean, we're all one. We are. I mean, I would say we are.
We definitely are. And I hate it here. I want to.
You know what this shit sounds like to me, TJ?
Yes.
You sound like, what's that guy's name in the architect in the Matrix? Like, what is the problem? The problem is choice. TJ.
Choice.
It seems like you're saying the operating system of my reality depends on this fucking false notion that I have free will. That's what it seems like. What you're saying.
Well, I mean, have I come to the conclusion yet that it's a false notion, Scotty? Have I said to you yet that it's a false notion?
Well, fair enough.
I haven't yet said that.
I think you shall, though. I think
wait for that shoe to drop before you say it.
You guys are the fucking Matrix, man.
So, free will as navigation. If chaos and quantum uncertainty shape the universe, free will might be the best. Might be best understood as the ability to navigate these uncertainties rather than an act with absolute autonomy.
That's what makes the most sense.
Our choices are influenced by a mix of deterministic factors and probabilistic events, but they are not entirely preordained. Emergent agency. Some theories propose that free will emerges from the complexity of systems rather than existing as a fundamental property. In this view, human consciousness and decision-making arise from the chaotic interplay of neurons, shaped by quantum randomness at a subatomic level. Our agency then is a product of chaos, not a rejection of it. If our agency is a product of chaos, not a rejection of it, the next logical step is to question the very concept of agency itself. Neuroscience and philosophy have interestingly sort of converged on this point. This is where I have to fucking tell you guys something. And this is also something that was touched upon by Rust in True Detective. And this is something that neuroscience has long believed. This is something that Buddhism has long believed. When it comes to the statement of I have free will, I do have some problems with free will, but my bigger problems are with I. Because there is no fucking I. The self, the entity that you call you or I, does not exist in any absolute sense. It's just a narrative, an emergent phenomena arising from countless interactive processes, none of which individually resemble this unified consciousness that we think we have. So, neuroscience has done a lot to dismantle the idea of the traditional, coherent, centralized self. We're not the captain of the ship. The self appears to be a construct cobbled together from various neural processes that operate largely beneath conscious awareness. The brain is not a monolithic entity, but a collection of specialized modules, each handling different tasks: vision, language, memory, emotion. These modules communicate and compete, but there is no single self that's directing traffic. There is no I at the head of it that's presiding over the fucking kingdom. The sensation of unity we experience is just an illusion, a seamless narrative that is constructed after the fact. It is a byproduct. Studies on patients with a severed corpus callosum, the bridge between the brain's hemispheres, provide compelling evidence for the modular mind. When the hemispheres are isolated, they behave like two separate entities. each with its own perceptions and decisions. Remarkably, the left hemisphere, which governs language, often fabricates explanations for actions initiated by the right hemisphere, showing how the brain constructs a coherent but fictional narrative of selfhood. So when it comes to the illusion of free will, neuroscientific experiments have shown that the decisions that occur in our brain happen milliseconds before entering our conscious awareness of them. This suggests that what we experience as free will is just post hoc rationalization, a story that the brain tells us to make sense of actions that are already underway. And Buddhism figured this out way before science did, by the way. Buddhism, by asserting that they says that clinging to the illusion of self is the root of all suffering, basically. The doctrine of anatta teaches that what we perceive as self is a composite of transient processes, sensations, volitions, and consciousness, none of which endure or exist independently. So neuroscience figured it out, but Buddhism figured it out fucking way sooner.
Yeah, well, they just, yeah. I think that honestly that shows that it's a simple observational reality, right?
Yeah. It's not beyond us. It shows that you don't really need to have scientific instruments or measurements to really fucking figure this out.
Well, in this case,
you can just go inward and see it.
Right.
Through observation, yeah. So free will may not belong to the I, but it could exist as an emergent property of the brain's complexity. Emergence occurs when simple interactions give rise to higher order behaviors not reducible to their parts. For example, the flocking of birds or the formation of consciousness itself emerges from individual components acting together. Free will in this sense could emerge from the chaotic interplay of neurons and networks without requiring any sort of central I. So the self as we perceive it is really just a byproduct of all of these underlying fucking processes, right?
Sure.
So where does that kind of leave free will? For me, it kind of leaves it in the realm of just like, what do you, I mean, it's starting to just become incoherent at this point, right?
It always was kind of like the people that assert that free will exists it's always come off as incoherent to me.
Well, so much with free will presupposes so many things, so many assumptions about people. That's why to me it's never really made sense. The only capacity I see free will making any sense is, like you said, like the limited probabilities of your physical reality, coupled with almost the illusion of in a system where you have these choices to make. And if the choice was just made for you, I don't think it would work necessarily. I think you have sometimes, on rare occasions, you have to almost feel like you're taking control, right? You have this conscious mind that's like, I'm taking control and making this decision. But it's almost been predetermined for you what the decisions you could possibly make are. That's kind of how I feel like. I feel like essentially it's almost like your operating system, like it counters an anomaly and it's like, oh, okay, I need you to take over for a second. It's like if you're driving down a road. Like I've been on road trips. I've driven hundreds of miles. I've not been conscious of what I was doing. I wasn't thinking, hey, I've got to pass this car. I've got to go here. It's going to call it highway hypnosis.
Never ride with Scotty. No, I'm kidding. It's the same way. You enter a I first heard it, and it's kind of funny to reference it because it's so goofy. But like gamers started talking about flow state.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This idea where you're not really consciously making the decisions in the game anymore because it's such second nature to you. Right. You're just kind of reacting in the moment. And
that's the same. It's the Wu-Wei concept.
That's some of the times you'll play best in a game for sure, dude. It's like you're just on point. You're like, I know you're saying you're not thinking like, oh shit, what button do I hit? You just know where your hands need to be. You know where you need to look. You know what you need to do.
Right.
So the brain functions as a self-organizing system, integrating sensory inputs, internal states, and memory into coherent actions. Decisions emerge from this process not as the will of an I, but as the product of dynamic, decentralized activity. These decisions are not entirely determined by external forces. They are shaped by the brain's unique history, context, and internal variability. So when it comes to like the role that chaos theory and quantum mechanics play in that, they just kind of add layers of unpredictability to that model. Because in chaotic systems, small changes in initial conditions lead to vastly different outcomes. So introducing a probabilistic element into decision making does the same thing. Similarly, quantum indeterminacy at the subatomic level could inject an element of randomness into the neural processes. This randomness doesn't negate free will necessarily. It provides the space for free will to potentially operate, depending on how you're going to determine what that is.
Sure.
As decisions emerge from a blend of deterministic rules and random events. The debate over free will boils down to semantics, in my opinion. What do we mean when we say free will, right? If we define it as the ability to act independently of all external and internal influences, then free will fucking almost certainly does not exist, right?
Yeah, it's an illusion at that point.
If we define it as a capacity to navigate possibilities within constraints, then it might. The argument pivots on how we frame agency. Are we active agents shaping our reality or passive observers of a predetermined process? Quantum mechanics, and specifically the concept of superposition, complicates that question in really fascinating ways. So in classical physics, determinism rules, right?
Yeah.
Cause and effect. If you know the position and momentum of every particle in the universe, you can theoretically predict the future with perfect accuracy. And that worldview leaves pretty much no room for free will. Everything is preordained by the laws of physics. However, quantum mechanics kind of shatters the deterministic framework. Because if reality itself is probabilistic at its core, as superposition kind of implies that it is, then determinism is fundamentally incomplete. The future is not preordained. It unfolds through an interplay of probabilities and observation. This introduces an opening for free will, perhaps not as absolute freedom, but as a process shaped by the dynamic interaction between randomness and order. So, all right, at this point, we finally arrived at what the fuck I think. And from here on, it's not going to be scientific at all. It's just going to be my insane fucking idea of how this all actually fucking works. Okay?
All right, Grandpa Simpson.
Sure.
So we're done with the fucking explanations that actually are rooted in science. We're entering the territory of my fucking speculative bullshit.
Yeah, fuck this science.
All that
I
was
mean,
just
I
for
gotta be honest,
context.
now we're getting to the stuff that really matters to me.
Right, here we go. So what if the quantum principle of superposition extends beyond particles to encompass choices themselves? Imagine that every decision exists in a superposition of possibilities until it is collapsed by our observation. This radical notion suggests that we don't make one choice, but we make all possible choices. Yet our experience is constrained by the linear nature of time, or the linear nature of our observations of time, into the illusion of a single coherent life narrative. When faced with a decision, all possible outcomes might exist simultaneously. In one reality, you take the job. In another, you decline. These aren't hypothetical possibilities. They are real coexisting states in a larger multi-dimensional framework. Your experience of choosing is not the act of creating one outcome, but merely the act of observing one path through a field of possibilities. Just as the observer collapses particle superpositions into one single state, the conscious observer might collapse the superposition of choices into one single lived experience. This doesn't imply that the I selectively chooses one outcome of the other over the others. Instead, your observation is the selection. Time and consciousness create a linear narrative from what might otherwise be an unfathomably complex web of simultaneous outcomes. And I believe that these outcomes are all layered on top of one another. So time, instead of just being a flat circle, is a big fucking tower of flat circles all superimposed onto one another.
I see.
Just as the observer collapses, the particles. I already read that part. So this is how I fucking view this in the terms of the free will debate. If we are the observers collapsing possibilities into experience, then free will is less about actions and more about perception. The choice you experience is one of many, all of which are equally real. What you call free will is the narrowing of infinity into a single thread of reality. In this framework, determinism coexists with freedom. At a macroscopic level, deterministic rules shape probabilities, but the superposition of possibilities creates room for variance. In a multiverse interpretation, every possible outcome exists. You simply experience one version due to collapsing nature of observation. Time is a linear construct that allows us to perceive cause and effect. Without this constraint, all possibilities would exist at once. Agency, then, may not be about causing an event, but about experiencing the collapse of potentialities into a sequential order. So basically, like, let's say you have two diverging lines, and maybe there's a y-axis. We'll just oversimplify it, and it just goes on there, and then it splits into y, and there's the upper and the lower. And because you are here, you experience all of that. Because you're here, you experience all of that. But really, it all happened. But this moment that you're experiencing now is just reflective of the decisions that causally would have led here within our limited linear perception of time.
Yeah, because that's been my question, but I think that kind of answers that, because I'm someone that, as far as I know, I believe in the multiverse. But but my question obviously would have been what you just said. It was like, well, are all those events happening at once? Because to me, it's like if you're saying there's infinite possibilities, like you don't take the job, you do take the job. You fucking go on this trip, you don't go on this trip. So you're saying all those realities exist, but it's when you observe those actions, then those other possibilities collapse, and your perception is that you're experiencing just that, where you don't go on the trip or whatever the fuck it is.
Well, but what I would say is that you retroactively experience the linear time that led you to this particular iteration of reality. But simultaneously, there are other versions of you that experience different linear realities heading back to the past. Some extraordinarily similar because they diverged recently, and some, extraordinarily different because
those
diverged a long time ago.
All those other iterations of reality I didn't choose or didn't experience, would those still exist?
I mean, in my opinion, yeah.
Okay, so they would still. So even after you pass them, and they that's not what you observe,
because you don't pass them, but
we don't pass them. Like,
you experience the linear reality that led to this moment because you are the you observing this.
Sure.
Right? But if there's another you that's observing a slightly different reality, they observe a different linear past that leads to that moment. So every fucking version of you has the sense of continuity, even though there is no fucking actual continuity. Because it's a flat circle.
Explain to us how there is no you. So how could there be versions of you?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's versions of the thing you identify as you.
The entity,
the colloquial you.
Yeah, the
but
entity,
then doesn't that just not matter though? If there is no, personality is like, you are nothing, right?
Right. Sure. Well,
like the
eye is nothing, but the brain that has the sense of that identity is something.
Sure. And so, I guess that's the only kind of issue that I take, is I feel like it centers the experience on the self, when this would be true for all of reality, right? And so
I don't want
our personal interaction with it, though, just becomes meaningless in the face of that then.
Well, yeah, but let's say that probabilistically the wind could blow one of two ways on a particular day, and in one reality the flower bends this way, and another reality the flower bends that way, right? There's still two versions of that flower superimposed on reality. And that's why that particle is in two different places until we probabilistically collapse it through observation, right?
Right. I see.
So the question remains, wait, did I already read this part? I think I already read this part. So when you peel back the layers of free will versus determinism debate, what emerges isn't a profound philosophical quandary, but a deeply flawed question. One that collapses under scrutiny on every conceivable level. To ask whether we have free will is to stumble over a cascade of assumptions that dissolve as soon as they're examined. In truth, the question is not only unanswerable, but meaningless, rooted in misdefined terms and a childish oversimplification of complex realities. The premise of the question assumes the existence of a coherent we capable of possessing free will in the first place, but as neuroscience and philosophy have shown, the self is an illusion, a narrative stitched together by neural processes to create the comfortable and comforting but false impression of a single enduring identity. Without a stable I, the question of whether we have free will becomes largely nonsensical. It's like asking whether a mirage owns a car. If the self is merely an emergent phenomena, a useful fiction, then the entire premise of free will existing for us is moot. There's no coherent entity to have or lack free will in the first place. Even if we set aside the issue of the self, the concept of having free will is absurd because have implies possession, as though free will is an object or a resource like a wallet or a pair of shoes.
Let me go ahead and use my free will today.
But free will, however you define it, is not a thing that can be owned or held. It is a process, a property of systems, or an emergent phenomena, or it just doesn't exist depending on your framework. To frame it as something that one has or doesn't have is a fundamental misunderstanding of nature. Moreover, the notion of possession presupposes agency, which is entirely, which you've already gone over. The term free will itself is just, it's a philosophical junk drawer, okay? It might as well be a drunk drawer, actually. It's a catch-all phrase that's been, clearly, it's never been clearly defined. It's never been consistently defined. Does it mean freedom from external influences? Does it mean freedom from causality? Does it mean the ability to choose otherwise? The capacity to act in accordance with one's own desires? Each definition raises new problems, contradictions, and ambiguities. In trying to encompass too much, the concept collapses under the weight of its own incoherencies. So philosophers and scientists have spent centuries debating a term that is so nebulous that it lacks any practical or theoretical utility. Worse, the obsession with defining and defending free will distracts from far more meaningful questions about choice, agency, and the nature of existence. So the free will versus determinism paradigm reduces the universe to a simplistic dichotomy. Either everything is preordained or we're entirely independent agents. This binary framing is like something a baby would come up with. It's an oversimplification that fails to capture the complexity of systems, the interplay of randomness and order, and the emergent properties of reality. Determinism isn't absolute because quantum mechanics introduces fundamental uncertainty. Free will isn't absolute because our decisions arise from unconscious processes shaped by genetics, environment, external constraints. The universe is not a coin flip. It's a symphony of probabilities and variables, feedback loops, dynamic interactions that render such black and white categories fucking obsolete. To cling to this paradigm is to miss the nuance and richness of how choices arise and how they interact with the systems around them. So fuck this entire free will discussion forever. Thank you very much. I am done.
Wow. That was compelling, TJ.
But TJ,
Tell me what you think. Go ahead.
all right, but TJ, how you explain
How I explain
people
what?
do bad things?
Well, I mean, if my theory is right, then people do the bad thing and the good thing simultaneously, right?
Well, not only that, but every permutation of bad and good between the two.
Right.
I just think that the human mind is not equipped to understand the probabilistic nature of what's going on, right?
Oh, woefully.
I understand the necessity of a self in terms of how we navigate reality, right?
Right.
But I don't understand I also don't believe that self is anything but a construct.
Right.
And, from my perspective and in my thinking, I'm kind of going from the perspective of, okay, so like one of these Chinese philosophers, I can't remember the name of him, some post-Lao Tzu Taoist philosopher said that the Tao is like the one eternal note that harmonizes with every other note, right?
Right.
And that's the way that I look at this, right? The Tao has led me to believe that when I look in the mirror, I'm not seeing myself. I'm seeing a microscopic part of myself. I'm seeing myself, or at least a broader perspective of myself, when I step outside and I look at the sun or the sky or the birds or the trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of a living, breathing organism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an individual within that organism. I'm a part of it. Right? I'm a part of its sensory organ, if we had to describe it as an organism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as such, I think that that's the one critique that I would have of your way of looking at it. It's very self-focused,
mm-hmm.
or at least it felt that way, right?
Right. Well, it's because I'm trying to apply it to the realm of
it,
free will, right?
You're defining it through the lens of human choice,
right?
When I think that human choice has no, well, I mean, like obviously it has an impact on reality, but I don't think it has an impact on your personal reality.
Sure. Well, one of the reasons, two reasons behind that, though, because the first reason is that, I was obviously looking at it through the lens of free will, which is something that pertains directly to us.
Right.
But the other reason is, if you think about it, like, probabilistically doesn't mean infinitely, because like if I'm looking at a 6-sided die, right?
Right.
I can't roll it and it rolls 7. Like, that's outside of the realm of probability, as far as we know, unless there's some other mechanism that could intercede.
Sure.
So like there's a limit. Like, probability is not endless, but when you're dealing with a human being, or really any animal, but I think it pertains to us probably more than almost any other creature because of the technology and the things we've developed and stuff. You're looking at a multitude of different possibilities that are hard to extrapolate to many other areas of nature. Like, if you're looking at like a rock, the rock is probably just going to sit there until acted upon by some external force. If you're looking at a human being, like, we could do all kinds of stuff, right?
Right.
So, like,
within a limited framework,
right? It's still a limited framework, but it's broader than what the rock can just decide to do. So
on a cosmic scale, is it all that broader?
Probably not.
No,
Not really. No.
So that's kind of that. You're starting to drill down into the problems. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong and I'm right.
No. I think we're just exploring nuances here.
Right. Like, for me, there's not much difference between a rock and a human being on any scale outside of the scale of me wanting to mean something.
Right. Well, I'm not saying that because we're more complex in our behavior, because like we can look at weather patterns, for instance, right?
Right.
Like, weather patterns are extraordinarily complex.
Right.
Probably more or equally complex to human beings, right?
Right.
It depends on how you measure.
I don't mean to be pedantic about it.
That doesn't mean weather patterns have a sentience or a fucking will or whatever the fuck.
If you grab a rock off the ground here on planet Earth, the chances that rock was part of the molten mantle of the Earth,
right,
at some point, being so much more dynamic and integral a part of the existence of reality as we can perceive it than it's hard for me to hold up human decision.
Well, that's true, because you're looking at a biological time scale versus a geological time scale. So the rock might have had
its problem. I don't think time exists. I think time exists because we as human beings needed a way to describe us withering away and ceasing to exist.
Sure.
I think from outside of this kind of personification way of thinking, there is no such thing as time.
Well, there must be, there must be some sort of corollary, whether or not our linear perception of time is I don't think it's accurate either. But there must be some corollary to some other aspect of reality, even if it's not, because
it's time. Like,
I can't go talk to like George Washington or something.
Not to drag it back to science, but science correlates it, right? It happens almost immediately with space and time.
Right.
Time is space, right? Yeah. So time is the playing field upon which observable reality is. It is not this linear motion from baby to old man.
No.
But that is how 99% of us have to perceive it. Because we have what else can we compare it to, right? We're such a brief thing to have the ability to even ask these questions is like a curse upon us.
Well, we know that there is an ability, if you travel at or near the speed of light, to travel through time.
Time.
There's time dilation that way. We also know that there are particles that are retrocausal, which means that if you do something to them in the present, it affects them in the past.
Well, so the past from our perspective.
Right. So we know that there is this ability to manipulate time. And if you look at the stars, you're looking at the stars from, billions of years ago in many instances, right?
Right.
Sure.
So there's all these sort of ways to manipulate time. We actually know that gravity warps time.
Sure.
So there's this idea that time is just this consistent sort of forward thing is obviously like a false notion.
Right.
But we can't deny that, like, within our perceptual framework of time, like, that rock exists far longer than we do. Right. It takes far many more forms and all this, but we don't really know what the nature of that is.
It's just a different form of us. That rock is made of the same shit as you are.
Sure. Everything in existence is
different arrangements of cells.
Yeah.
That's it. Right.
But that rock, as far as we know, does not have cognition.
Well, no, but if it did, what kind of fucking story would it tell?
Right.
Oh, God, yeah.
It would have a crazy story.
That's my point, is our ability to quantify our story and go, oh, crazy experiential history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make what we are different from that rock, or doesn't make what that rock has gone through in the history of its current existence any more or less impactful than the average human life, right?
No.
I just don't see, like, I understand personifying it to understand it.
Sure.
But as I started exploring these ideas and started to try and understand them, what I came to is that the struggle that I have in this conscious, like to personify this experience that we're talking about protons being connected across infinite space, or maybe even occupying a superposition we're not observing, so that the apparency of it being you know what I mean? Like, we're getting so deep into the muck here, because I feel like we're trying to look at it through the lens of like, well, what does that mean to me in my limited time on this planet?
Oh yeah.
How do you separate?
The crazy thing is, we can introduce 1,000 more concepts to it to make it even more fucking complex. Like, we can introduce the concept of like panpsychism, which is the idea that rock does have a sense of identity.
Well, sure.
And that and then every molecule within that rock has its own sense of identity, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And infinite reduction, essentially.
Right, which some mathematicians, especially, it seems that idea especially appeals to mathematicians for some reason. I don't know the reasoning behind that, because I'm not a mathematician, but
for me, and maybe this is just maybe I don't like some aspects of what you said, because it challenges a notion that I take great comfort in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Decoupling myself from my ego, at least, like from a practice point of view, has been so fucking helpful to me. When I walk out of my house every morning, I look directly into the fucking sun, right? I not staring at it to make my eyes bleed, but I look right at that sun, and I have this feeling that I can't describe other than, right?
Mm-hmm.
A depersonalization happens.
Right.
And I feel like for a moment or two, I can perceive the truth.
Well, the thing is that
I am just a tiny part of this giant process, right?
Well, inarguably.
Yeah, I mean, you most certainly.
And my experiences, like, my experiences are part of its. Like, if we were to personify it, I would be part of its fucking sensory system.
Right.
Yeah.
I would be a method by which it observes itself and nothing more.
Yeah, that's definitely a sentiment I've heard. Like, humanity is kind of the universe's way of knowing itself in a way, and observing itself and trying to understand itself, and to some small degree.
But if I don't know, maybe it's just the existence of the self, the idea of a self that I have.
Well, no, there isn't. I mean, like, one of the fundamental things is there is no self. I mean, like, neuroscience has shown it. Philosophy has shown it in a fucking million and one. I only went into the Buddhist thing, but really, like, the idea has been toyed with before. Right. But neuroscience seems to confirm that the self is just a byproduct of underlying biological processes. So
it's like, hey, you know what? We got to make all this shit make sense to this thing.
I mean, it's
You're
just
TJ.
It's just a story we're telling ourselves as it's going along.
Right.
Sure.
Right. There is no grander self. There is no I in the machine. The ego is basically just a fucking fairy tale.
Right.
Right. But nonetheless, it's very pervasive in our society. It's not very pervasive in the cosmos. It's very pervasive here on Earth, though.
Sure.
But it doesn't, even if there is such a thing as free will, it certainly doesn't reside within the ego, because we know that the process has happened deeper than that.
See, from my perspective, if it doesn't reside there, then it can't be.
Right.
Like, because the only thing that you have, like, free will implies that there's a choice before you that is the end result of a streamline of choices that you have made cognitively, and that you will cognitively, as a being, make that choice, when I don't believe that is the case.
So by that standard of free will, it flat out just doesn't exist. It's not real. And I think that when people talk about free will, that is what they're talking about, at least for the most part.
Right.
So, I mean, by that standard, it's not
there.
there.
You are the iteration of you has full agency, and you make all your decisions, and you're in total control.
What I'm saying is
That's what
that
most
if there is some sort of thing within us that has the agency or capacity for free will, it's certainly not this surface level identification. If it does exist at all, it exists on some deeper level. And I don't think calling it free will is really a useful term at that point.
It's an oversimplification.
I think that there is a heuristic, probabilistic fucking drive that exists there that can maybe fucking choose between options, maybe time influences, maybe a little fucking quantum, fluctuations influences it, but ultimately it's making the decisions, and then you're informed afterwards, and then you come to this, oh, I made this decision, but you didn't make the decision.
Right.
You're just observing the decision. So, and that's basically where I'm at with it. I don't believe free will exists in any meaningful way. It's been used before, and I kind of think the whole thing is a little bit silly. And I hope that at least clarifies where I am with it.
Yeah, some people you can send people this video to the end of time. What do you think about free will? Here you go.
Like, well, what about evil though?
Oh God.
Whence cometh evil, TJ?
Whence cometh evil, bruh? Like, all right.
Bye. Bye. Whence cometh evil guy, and bye you guys too.
Bye, everybody. All right, Paul.